economic activity for the region. And of course, in the case of Guyana, Mr. Samaroo is also the chairman of Demerara Distillers Limited. Mr. Samaroo, your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wesley, and thank you for inviting me to join this panel. I'm delighted to meet the other panelists and to share my perspective on the situation. First of all, I want to say that if ever there was the need to make a case for the rum industry, COVID had done that. Because within days of the outbreak of COVID, rum producers across the Caribbean reoriented their production to produce high-strength alcohol to be used as sanitizers in an effort to meet an urgent need that arose in society. And so our producers across the region rose to the challenge and in many instances offered generous donation to assist. If we did not have a distilling industry, I think the region would have been much worse off than it actually turned out to be. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that, as alluded to by previous speakers, the tourism industry is a major industry in the Caribbean, and the rum industry is a major supplier to that segment of the economy. And with the tourism sector being at a virtual standstill, obviously markets are being affected in a very, very significant way. In addition to the domestic markets, the markets around the world is also affected. I've just been reading a report that says in the United States, the sales at restaurants and bars in the last month has declined by 26.5%. A lot of that has to be coming from the bar sales because on the food side, there's been a lot more of takeaway, and entities like Uber Eats and so on have been providing transportation, delivering food from some of these restaurants. So the markets for the products that we produce around the world is collapsing at this time as the entertainment and the hospitality industry is brought to a standstill. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this and the implication it has for the Caribbean rum industry. We are, in global terms, our brands are relatively small. We are niche, we're high-end brands. And when markets contract, retailers start to rationalize the brands that they carry, the brands that they stock, what they reorder. And generally in a contracting market situation, it is the mainstay brands that get the attention. The small, the niche brands, the high value brands are the ones that suffer. And so I do believe that at the end of this entire experience, there will be the need to be a massive reinvestment in marketing activities by the Caribbean rum industry to reclaim some of the space that is presently occupied. This is a major challenge because our industry historically has been one of supplying bulk, and it is in the last 10 to 15 years that we have been pioneering brands moving higher up the value chain. So specifically in relation to the industry that I represent, I want to share that perspective. And I want to make the point that rum is probably the highest value product that comes out of the agriculture sector. Okay. Now, in relation to the question of food security, which is a matter that's very near and dear to me, I want to share my perspective. I do believe that there's a lot of work to be done in the region in creating value chains where the regional food supply chain is more integrated. Historically, in colonial times, our supply chain flowed to the mother country. We all produced sugar and we shipped it to England. And we imported refined sugar to use. And sugar was it basically. Now, we have not, while the sugar sector has contracted, the other agriculture sector has not grown. And that is a dilemma. The Caribbean now is a major importer of the food that it consumes. And one of the big challenges before us is how do we reduce the food import bill, which our fragile economies cannot afford. When our foreign exchange earnings in tourism and other exports decline, how are we going to afford to import food and to maintain the food import bill that we are importing at the moment? And while it's a major challenge, I do believe that it does present an opportunity for the region to come together and sit down and work to really create a regional industry based on regional agriculture with a supply chain that runs across the region. We have not built supply chain. And the example that I've been talking about very often was when England tried to come out of the European Union. The English-Irish border, because the supply chain crisscrossed that border, was the most difficult issue to resolve. Right? Their markets are integrated. Ours in the region are 12 or 13 different individual markets. I want to say that it was in November 2016 that the CARICOM Secretariat invited me to talk at an investment seminar in Cayman Islands. And at that seminar, I quoted from an international renowned economist, Mariano Mazzucato, who wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial State. And I quoted from that state to show how important role the state has in investing in the developmental phase of supply chain until it gets to a stage where private sector can take it and move it forward. And the analogy she made was that the United States government invested in the biotechnology, the internet technology, the electric vehicle technology, shale gas, all to a point, and then allow the private sector to move forward. I also made the point at that seminar, I made 6 points in relation to the region starting to address its food import bill and developing its agriculture and its agro industries. I talked about the education system, an education system that up to this day prepare all of our youths to find an employment rather than to enter the world of business and entrepreneurship. I talked about the need for the region to come up with an arrangement whereby a regional producer needs to do one registration of a trademark rather than 12 or 13 at the moment. The region needs to make it easy for entrepreneurs to develop and expand their business rather than to have it as cumbersome navigating 12 or 14 different jurisdictions. I talked about the need for us to differentiate through new labeling standards on food that is produced from agriculture products grown in the region versus what is imported. I talked about the need to educate the consumers about that so that there's much greater awareness. I talked about the need for the Caribbean as an origin of good quality food, not genetically modified, organic in nature, is marketed. And I made the analogy at that time that the same way cognac is marketed as the place where the best brandy comes from, we should be able to market the Caribbean as a place where good quality, wholesome food comes from. And I talked about the role of government in supporting those marketing activities. I believe that this is the time, that the time has come now for us to really get down, governments and private sector, and come up with time-bound plans that one can work with so as to reduce immediately the food import bill, which I believe our shattered economy will find very difficult to meet in the coming months. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Samaroo. Of course, there's been a lot of talk from or reference to the tourism industry, and Eldon, for someone who has been in the industry for most of their life, as a hotelier both in the Caribbean and outside of the Caribbean, and involved in other aspects of the hospitality industry, your perspective on how we might deal with this industry, and I suppose the question we can ask is, will the industry survive this crisis?
Thank you, Wesley. Panel. COVID-19, also referred to as the coronavirus, is dominating headlines the world over. The travel and tourism industry globally is suffering significant disruption, and it is having a damaging effect on the Caribbean tourism and regional economies. Many of the islands are tourism dependent, and the region relies heavily on the sector as its main source of foreign exchange earnings. In addition to hotel owners and operators, the impact of the pandemic extends to tourism-related partners, such as suppliers, farmers, ground-based transportation, as well as allied industries, telecommunications, banking, financial services, manufacturers of food, drink products, for example. Virtually every aspect of the region economy will be impacted. I will forego statistics and say outright that countries that are solely or heavily dependent on tourism will have a challenge in creating a recovery plan. Most plans will be zero-based. Some tourism entities may not recover. Many others may take many years to snap back. The challenge for the region and tourism is twofold. One, surviving during the pandemic, and two, returning to normalcy. The latter is an even greater challenge as we are emerging a new world order, which many are predicting is the new normal. During the pandemic, tourism sector is one of the hardest hit. Hotels are experiencing zero occupancy, airports zero arrivals, and massive unemployment in the country. How do we survive, and what do we do during this period? Government, ensure laid-off workers get some impact payments on food items. Private sector to provide assistance to workers. Local businesses that shows compassion and generosity will be the winners during recovery and when we get back to normalcy. The wealthy should assist government by pooling in of resources. Businesses that is still operating, establish remote work options. Keep your employees and your customers safe by being as proactive as possible about cleanliness. Businesses carry out preventative maintenance of plants, carry out deep cleaning exercises. Workers, improve yourselves by doing online courses, reading online journals and publications. The beginning of the recovery period is dependent on when the all clear is given to open the economy. On the plus side, the Caribbean has consistently demonstrated ability to recover from economic downturns resulting from hurricanes and other major disasters. It is this resilience, this propensity to overcome that will serve us well in the near and future terms. Realistically, though unfortunately, some of the major players in the hospitality arena may not survive. Hopefully, there will be opportunities for new players